It is now my pleasure to introduce our very special keynote speakers. I'd like to introduce Wendy Wright. Wendy Wright received her Doctor of Nursing Practice in 2019 from the University of Alabama, Tuscaloosa. She is a 1992 graduate of the Adult Primary Care Nurse Practitioner Program at Simmons College in Boston, Massachusetts, and completed a Family Nurse Practitioner Postmaster's Program in 1995. She's an adult and family nurse practitioner and the owner of 2 nurse practitioner-owned and operated clinics within New Hampshire, named Wright & Associates Family Healthcare. Her family practices have won numerous awards, including Top Providers in New Hampshire 2018, Top 20 Fastest Growing Family Business, and Top 20 Women-Owned Business in New Hampshire. In addition, she is the owner of Partners in Healthcare Education, a medical education company. She is the past president of NPACE and the senior lecturer for Fitzgerald Health Education Associates. She is the recipient of numerous awards and was chosen by the American Association of Nurse Practitioners as the 1999 recipient of the New Hampshire State Excellence Award. In addition, she received the 2009 New Hampshire Nurse Practitioner of the Year and the 2014 Top 5 Women in New Hampshire Business Award. In 2005, she was inducted as a fellow into the American Academy of Nurse Practitioners. In October 2014, a fellow in the American Academy of Nursing, and in March of 2017, a fellow into the National Academies of Practice. She is the founder of the New Hampshire Chamber of Entrepreneurial Nurse Practitioners, an organization designed to assist nurse practitioners with independent practice issues. In addition to full-time clinical practice, she presents nationally to different audiences and has been a speaker at over 1,000 conferences in 47 states. We've got 3 more to go.
I do.
She is the nurse practitioner representative to the State of New Hampshire Immunization Advisory Board. She has been a medical media spokesperson for numerous companies and has appeared on radio, television, and in print magazines. Wendy is frequently consulted by malpractice attorneys around the area of clinical practice and has worked on more than 100 malpractice cases involving nurses and nurse practitioners. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Wendy Wright, nurse practitioner.
Thank you.
It's now my honor to introduce Dr. Loretta Ford. Dr. Loretta C. Ford, Dean and Professor Emerita, School of Nursing, University of Rochester, is an internationally renowned nursing leader. She has devoted her career to practice, education, research, consultation, and influencing health services, community health, and military nursing. Dr. Ford studies on the nurse's expanded scope of practice in public health nursing. Her specialty led to the creation of the first pediatric nurse practitioner model of advanced practice at the University of Colorado Medical Center. This model of advanced nursing practice has sparked the expansion into many fields of nursing practice. Today, there are over 205,000 NPs practicing in the US, with many similar expansions around the globe. Dr. Ford holds honorary doctorates from 9 prestigious universities and myriads of awards. She has authored well over 200 publications of presentations. Currently, Dr. Ford consults and lectures on the historical development of the nurse practitioner and on issues in advanced nursing practice and healthcare policy. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Loretta Ford, nurse practitioner.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, good morning.
Good morning.
You have a bunch of fans here.
Well, I'm a fan of them too, so that was, sort of reciprocal.
You know, Dr. Ford's been trying to retire, she tells me, but we're just not letting her. So we're going to have a great conversation this morning. Shall we get started?
Get started.
All righty. So I thought I would give our folks here a little bit of the past of kind of where you've come from, and then we'll take it from there. And I hope I got this right. So we'll give it a whirl.
Where I come from?
There's no way you were born December 1920.
Well, so I've been around a long time. And on my bucket list, I have two things going. I want to make it to 100 so I can celebrate the year the women got the vote, 100th anniversary, and I can vote. And I hope all of you will too.
We had a conversation over dinner last night about the importance of voting and making sure that we're using our voices, not just on a national level, but for NPs in our states, et cetera. So it was great. I thought it was amazing that you were born the year that women had the right to vote legally for the first time, which was amazing.
I couldn't vote that year, I was just born.
So my understanding is that you received your doctorate of education from the University of Colorado.
Yeah.
But my understanding was that you thought you were originally going to be a teacher, that's what your plans were when you were younger. Is that true?
Yes, and I took a circuitous route to get here through a diploma school, and I went to the military, and afterwards went on to start my education.
And you worked as an RN, I believe, on military bases. Is that correct?
Yes, the primary care. I've worked a lot in the hospitals too, but primary care and public health nursing has been my love. And I believe in the community involvement and patient education and that sort of thing, and public health nursing was really the kind of nursing that I enjoyed.
What led you to develop this role? What led you to develop the NP role? Can you let us know kind of what was happening at the time?
Well, it was obviously my role as a public health nurse in both the ghettos in New Jersey and in the hills and rural area of Colorado, where I was a public health nurse for many years. And the obvious need that the community had for health and wellness and prevention and promotion and preservation, as well as protection in terms of health services, was the independence of this public health nurse, because there were no other health professionals, and we depended on the state health department for our consultation. So, you were sort of like the Lone Ranger in the rural areas. Everything that happened, from contamination of wells to communicable diseases, fell into your court. So there's a tremendous amount of independence there. But also at the time, we were running child health clinics. Everything was oriented toward health and wellness, keeping people well or helping them to get well. And so when we were running the child health clinics, these were all for growth and development of children and teaching parents and being involved at that level and doing the follow-up. So it was really based on community need. So when I went to the university to teach, it was at a time when there was a shift in graduate education focus from supervision and administration at the master's level to clinical practice, the advanced clinical practicing. So each of us in a specialty of public health and psychiatric, med-surg and pediatrics, each of these four specialties, faculties, had the responsibility of identifying the content and processes for the development of clinical specialists at their particular specialty or in their particular specialty. So the community need, the changing environment, and the possibility that nurses could do it, because if the physician didn't show up at the child health conferences, we ran them as nursing conferences.
So I heard you say something really important, and I'd like to have a conversation about this. What I didn't hear you say today, I think, is just as important as what I heard you say. What you didn't say was there was a lack of physicians.
Well, there's a difference, though, in starting something because you have the opportunity or you're replacing them. We could teach nurses to run the child health conferences without physicians as long as they were health and wellness oriented, and they were. But that's a big myth that I, as a nurse educator, would be concerned about deficits in medicine. That's their problem. It's not mine. I mean, my job as an academician was to prepare nurses at this advanced level for practice. So people get mixed up in understanding that myth, and that we did it because the physicians weren't doing it. We were not substitutes for the medical model. We were developing an advanced nursing model.
And I think that conversation is still happening today.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe even more so, I don't know, but it seems like that's the headline.
Yeah, lies die hard.
So one of the things that you and I talked about is when I knew I was going to have the honor of interviewing you, I put it out on social media and I said to my colleagues around the country, if you had 5 minutes with Dr. Ford, what would you ask her? And we received hundreds of comments. So what I've done is I've chosen a few of the questions. I think you said I chose a lot of questions. We're going to see what we can get through. But I did choose a few of the questions to ask you. I hope that that's okay. So these are from your fans and your colleagues around the nation. So the first question that was posed that I chose is from Julia Mason, who comes to us from New York, and she asked the following question: what was the biggest resistance you had to overcome when you formed this role?
Well, very interesting, and it's a myth too, is that physicians were against it. Physicians were not against it. They were happy to see them because they looked at the nurse practitioner as a helper, or as a partner particularly, but so they didn't resist. It was my own colleagues in the School of Nursing and around the nation. The nurse educators were the most antagonistic to the idea of the nurse practitioner, because they interpreted it as a physician handmaiden, that we were there to relieve the physician and replace them and to do what we were told to do. Well, that wasn't it at all, and convincing them by conversation was almost impossible because they wouldn't talk to me, and they didn't want to hear it. So it's kind of tough. It's a way to. There's a special way that academics have of bullying, and so it's not talking to, gossiping, and putting up barriers in the academic world. So it was really, unfortunately, in nursing, and a special group of I would say most of them were older and tenured. The young kids, young teachers were eager and delighted to learn some of the things we were teaching, but it was a very difficult time.
And I've read an interview in the past where you have said just that much of your greatest resistance came from our nursing colleagues who felt that we were selling out to medicine or that we were becoming a handmaiden to physicians. And it sounds like that was the case.
Yes.
So Dr. Silver helped you to develop this role, I believe, or was a part of this role.
Yeah. Henry Silver and I were partners, and he was a very able pediatrician. Was a partner himself at the medical school of Dr. Henry Kemp, who was a well-known, world-known pediatrician. Was part of the eradication of smallpox around the world. And, but the important thing is that Henry Silver and I were partners, and I maintained the nursing values and the nursing aspects and also the nursing contacts throughout our time. And Henry Donnery was a very fine clinical teacher. He was politically astute. And between him and Henry Kemp, the medical community was supportive.
What do you think Dr. Silver would say about the role that we have carved out today?
Well, I think early on, we recognized that some other specialties would be very interested in it. And Henry had visions, and I don't think he'd be too surprised if he had survived this. And he didn't have the resistance. That's a kind word to say it.
He didn't have the resistance you had?
I had, in terms of his colleagues.
Wow.
So that made a great deal of difference. And we didn't talk about that very much, but I didn't talk to many people about it at all.
Was that tough for you at that time, to have the resistance from your colleagues?
Yes, it was. It was very tough. But I'll tell you, the support that I got and the evidence that I was getting from the students and the patients about this new role was overwhelmingly good. And our students were in our project, were very happy with what they were learning and what they were doing, and it was almost like a metamorphosis in terms of their enthusiasm for nursing and for this new role. And they knew they weren't trying to be physicians. We didn't ever indicate that that would be their role. But physicians were being used much better in terms of their skills and what they had to offer when they worked with nurse practitioners. And so they soon supported us quite a bit.
Thank you. Some great insights. So can we shift now from the past to where we are today? Let's talk about the present. Sarah Deso is the lead provider at CVS Minute Clinic in Ohio. And she asked the following question: can you tell us about your most memorable stumbling block, a time where you almost threw in the towel but you didn't, and how did you overcome it?
Stumbling block. There were quite a few. I'm trying to think of the. Well, in a way, it was the organizations, because the nursing organizations did not respond to supporting or responding to the request for involvement, for continuing education, or so we didn't have national organization support. There were no big organizations that were willing to set up a room for them in their organizations. And so it created sort of an orphan child. They weren't accepted in some academics, and they weren't accepted in terms of organizations. So what does one do? Well, you have a very good demonstration of what happened, because they began to set up their own. And they were a growing group. And the first sponsorship of an organization, which I didn't agree with, frankly, but it was an opportunity for nurses to be recognized, nurse practitioners to be recognized, was the American Academy of Pediatrics. That's how NAPNAP was formed.
Okay.
And because the American Academy of Pediatrics, and that was because of Henry Silver and Henry Kemp, who were very big wheels in those organizations. But they gave them a home for a nursing organization. So the big nursing organizations missed out on the opportunity to support it and help it grow.
I wonder if many of the folks in the audience realize that NPACE was the earliest continuing education provider, particularly nonprofit, in the nation. And it was back in around 1980 that the AANP actually was formed at the NPACE Boston meeting with a bunch of early pioneers and thinkers who really felt the need to have a national organization.
Yes, NPACE had a really very early organizational support. Well, I can remember when it was a very fledgling group of a few individuals who got together and decided they needed to sponsor some continuing education. And so it was a very small, very committed group. Of course, that's what Margaret Mead said, right? Never doubt that a thoughtful, small group can't change the world, because that's the only thing they can. And in a sense, NPACE is a good demonstration of her thesis that small, thoughtful, committed group can change the world.
I think that's what we have with our colleagues. I really do. It amazes me that now today, AANP has about 100,000 members. Is that 270,000 practicing nurse practitioners?
And about 50 countries around the world.
You told me that last night.
We don't know how many there really are, but they're organized under the ICN, the International Council of Nurses. And so there are at least 50 countries, but we don't know how many members or nurses they have. But they've embraced it, and some of them much more quickly and fully than the US did in the early days. So, because, you know, this is half a century later, and we're still in the process of getting the freedom in all states to practice to the full extent of your preparation. So we still have a lot of political work to do in getting the freedom to practice to the full extent of our.
How do you think we can do that?
Well, a disaster is always a great time. Crisis, the symbol for crisis in Chinese is both crisis and opportunity. And so I look at it as an opportunity to, anytime you have a crisis, people are willing to take any kind of help or any kind of thing. And I don't want any more world crisis than we have. We've done a pretty good job of making them. So I think this might be a good time to, because we don't have a very good reputation in health around the world, and our commitment to health and wellness as other countries do. We spend more, we have more emphasis on disease than we do on prevention. We have a very high maternal death rate. We don't have a very good reputation on national statistics, so it's about time we moved our tails and got to work.
I agree with you. One of your biggest fans, Dr. Khalil, I think you golfed with him on your 98th birthday.
Yes.
He asked me to ask you if he's your favorite nurse practitioner.
I'll say no, but yes, he was.
Did you beat him at golf or did he win?
No, he was the one who, when we get up to the green, and we had this 4-person team, and he said, "We can do it, we can do it." He was the cheerleader. Of course, we couldn't, but he told us we could do it. He's a tremendous cheerleader and a great supporter, and I do love him, but he's already married.
Oh, that's funny. So here's what he said, and here's what he wanted to ask you. He gave me a little bit of an editorial, but he said, for decades, our biggest barriers have been external to the profession, and it sounds like you're saying that they may really be internal, but we'll get to that. In the form of restrictive practice policies, please share us your thoughts on the current quality of nurse practitioner education, and do you think that this now represents an internal challenge? With the programs moving more to online programs and more hybrid programs, I think that's really what he's getting at. Do you think that this will affect us?
Well, we're at a continuing stage of early development in some things. And when you're trying different things, you're bound to have failures and successes until things, it's a shakedown period in many educational programs in terms of online. And I think you go through that. I think the enthusiasm of people needs to be harnessed into some kind of standards and things. But I am not as concerned about that. I'm concerned that people keep moving in the direction of professional excellence and academic preparation. But you need to have an opportunity to test out ideas. You know, academics tend to be very conservative. And the ones who have made it, to me, seem to be too conservative, more conservative than that. But I'm kind of a rebel on that, so don't take my word for it. But I do believe that we have to encourage people to innovate, and we have to accept some failures as learning experiences and use them. If you don't ever risk anything, you'll never be wrong and you'll never get anything done. And so what's your goal? Just to keep the status quo or to move into innovations and exploration, experimentation, with some encouragement and standards to meet. And if you don't, well then that idea didn't work. But if you never try anything, you'll never get anywhere in terms of big or not. We're a big country with a lot of different ideas and a lot of different cultures to accommodate. And that's what makes it exciting and fun, because you don't want to be doing the same thing over and over. You know, it's very hard to evaluate experience. You can have 20 years of experience, or you can have 20 years of 1 year experience and continue it. So we know people who haven't moved in 20 years and think everything is the same as it was back then, or should be. And they're going to hold up progress because things are going to change, and you want to be part of it, or you want to create it, then you've got to take the lumps and bumps of criticisms and resistance and things, because people do not like change, particularly if they created what's going on.
Change is hard, I think, for a lot of people, but I also think you said something that really resonated with me, and that is we've got to maintain our quality. Because one of the things we've said for the last 50 years is that when you look at the outcomes that NPs can produce, they're high quality and they're often very cost effective. Mm-hmm. So I think we've got to find our way of not becoming a part of the system where we're bringing people in and we're churning people out, because that's what the systems have done to our colleagues. We've got to find a way to maintain that so we can maintain our quality as well. Would you?
Yes, I think that's a good summary of the situation. And in a way, I am very, of course, time is going very fast for me, so I am unhappy with how slowly things change. We've been in this for over a half a century. And do you really need a half a century to demonstrate this? It was really relatively little change as part of nursing. Most of the things that we were teaching in terms of anatomy and physiology all over again, they had never used since they left school. And when they began to have to use it, they had to go back and look at it and then learn what had changed over the years. And I think we're going to, with the artificial intelligence and all those kinds of things, we're going to see some major, major changes. So our nursing is better positioned, by the way, than most of the professions, I think, who have gotten very technical and because I think artificial intelligence takes away a lot of that technical skill that we had. We're going to have to use some clinical thinking skills as well as some of the human and humane skills we learned earlier, and were part of nursing.
I agree with you 100%. Rosaline from Illinois asks, I love this question, if you could sit down with one person in the entire world, who would it be and what would you ask her or him?
One person. I guess I'd pick a political figure. but I want to ask him or her. I don't know who I would pick, one person.
Want us to go on? You can think about it, and if you come up with someone.
Yeah, I've gone through this several times. You know, I think I'd pick Gandhi, because he's not around anymore. But
That's okay. It's all right.
I think I would.
Is there something you can think of that you would ask Gandhi?
Well, I'd ask him about how we might, more than what we had heard him publicly say, how we might bring peace to the world in terms of our daily. I'm sure he has said some, but maybe as he looked at things from afar to today, how we can allow ourselves to get in such a mess in the world. Because I believe we're really in a global society, and that we have to live in the world rather than just the United States
Absolutely.
or just North America. I believe we have to live in the world and have a leadership. You have a leadership role in the world. Well, our vision is too narrow. We have to have a broader vision of man and humane.
Speaking of a broader vision, love this picture. Founding Dean, University of Rochester School of Nursing. What took you to Rochester?
Well, first of all, I wasn't very welcome to Colorado anymore. I had a very cold exit. But I am a very loyal alumni, don't get me wrong. I still am committed to the School of Nursing and the university, and grateful for the education I got there. So I'm an active member of the alumni. But what took me really was an opportunity to unify practice, research, education, and demonstration that the system has got to change in order for us to use these differently prepared nurses. And they had to be willing to use nurse practitioners in every setting. So I was director of nursing in the 800-bed hospital and also the dean of the school. And of course I couldn't do that, but the team that, a lot of them who were there had demonstrated that we had practicing faculty. They had a very good relationship with medicine and nursing. But that school had it was a hospital school, and then went to a university. But I recognize that changing the role of one professional was a very small goal comparing to changing a system. So we had to demonstrate a system where practice and education and nursing could get together and could function across these various independent silos, including medicine. And so I had a unique medical school, had a very different history of a troika of nursing, of nurse chief, administrator, and medical chief working together historically. And so we could demonstrate that teaching was enriched by practice research. The research was pertinent to the practice problems, and practice was advanced by this combination.
You told me last night that the university had been courting you for a while.
Yes.
It took them a while to get you.
Well, it was difficult to move because my husband was a Coloradan, and everything we owned out there, and Rochester, the sun shines 350 days out of a year in Colorado and doesn't show up much in Rochester. So that it was a difficult decision, and in the environment as well as personal holdings,
Will you share with them the story about how you left for a trip and Bill, your husband, spoke to the provost?
Yes. I had a very unique husband, as you can imagine. He was one of God's noblemen, and he wasn't a pansy. He spent 4 years in the Pacific fighting in World War II, but I call him the wind beneath my wings, because, of course, when we were married, I said to him, I was involved in education at the time. We met at the university. He was in engineering and I was in nursing. I said, I am not interested in getting married. Of course, then you didn't live together except in sin. So I didn't quite live in sin, and I didn't want to, and I didn't want to get married and give up education and all those things. I said, I put $250 in the bank. That's what it cost to get a divorce at that time. And this is the truth. And I said, I'm good. If this doesn't work out, I'm out of here. Because education was my primary goal. So he thought that was fine, it's okay. And so since then, we really had a partnership of things. And I left on the trip. The only way I survived really was I was invited many places to speak about this new role. And I got better reception on the trips than I did on staying home. So I did speak a lot on it. And I said to Bill, look, I'd like to go to Rochester. It's a professional opportunity. The weather isn't great, but they even offered him a job. And he didn't want to give up his teaching, but so I didn't know whether I was going to Rochester or not. I said, if I'm going, I said, if you want to go, here's the number of the provost to call. So I didn't know till I got home. We didn't have cell phones at that time, so you could, but I didn't know that he called the provost and said, she's coming. He said, the provost ran down the hall yelling, she's coming, she's coming. I could hear him on the phone. I said, yeah, she's coming around the mountain. So, and it was one of the best decisions we had made in our marriage.
It's excellent.
So it worked out.
So now that we're talking as a segue to education, Dr. Pat White, she's an associate professor at the University of Massachusetts, wants to know, what are your thoughts on the DNP as an entrance into NP practice?
Well, I think the DNP is a natural progression for the profession. And it came about because of the nurse practitioner group anyway. They wanted, and I did a lot of continuing education, of course, and they at these meetings would say, well, we don't want to devote our lives, we don't want to give up practice to do the research. And of course, they weren't interested in that kind of research anyway that was going on. And the kind of research was going on was related to numbers of students doing kinds of things, but it wasn't clinical. So they had to, they wanted more than what the continuing education was providing, and wanted, beyond the master's, to have a professional degree. Now, people do not understand very well that a professional degree is what an MD is, it's what an EDD is, it's what a lawyer does. They're professional doctorates who deserve to be called doctor, along with the PhD. And the PhD was a pure research degree at the time. So their combination of thinking about this, they wanted something. So there was a lot of perturbation in that system of massive people who wanted more. But there was a little, and I think this is a shakedown period for the DNP. You've got to have enough to realize what you're going to have to, what it should be like in terms of quality and standards and outcomes of your student group. So probably some of the programs are not as quality oriented as they could be. But I've lived long enough to know that change is not easy, and I see the DNP as a wonderful opportunity for translational research, because the DNPs are experts in patient care practice, and if they team up with PhDs, the translational research to improve practice is, I think, a real winner. So I recommend that the research that the DNP does as a special project, if they have a particular interest in that, in increasing the quality of care or a different way to do care, they team up with the research people in their school or in another field. I see big opportunities for the DNP with engineers or microbiologists. So it doesn't have to be with a PhD in nursing, but it has to be with a researcher in a field that would impact on it. And I'd like to see more of that, more cross-disciplinary research efforts, because I think it will enrich both professions and increase the quality of care as well as possibly reduce costs.
Excellent. We're getting down to about our last 10 minutes or so. Kelly Pavlish out of Nebraska asks you, with so much life experience, if you could go back and do something different, what would you do differently if you could?
Whatever I did differently, I would do shorter time, because there's so many things out there to do or to learn. It's more to learn than it is to just do things well, because if you're doing them well, you'll have to keep asking yourself, can I do this better? Can I do this less expensively? Can I do this to save time? Can I do this to increase the quality or whatever? So I think not being satisfied completely with all you do, and examining it pretty carefully.
It sounds like to me that that's a segue to Helene Victor, Dr. Victor's question about where do you see the future of our profession going?
Well, I'm hoping that we will really be a part of some of the change, big change agent in terms of the culture of wellness, moving the culture to a culture of wellness from a culture of illness in terms of that. Now, there's some of that going on. We have, like Eileen O'Grady is a health coach. That's one by one, but we need to move communities and move larger groups so that we really reorient the total communities and national policy for health and wellness. Because we're not going to reduce costs as long as we reward and expect to maintain this level of both illness and the cost of illness when we can control it by changing lifestyles and environments and rewards and things of that nature. So I think we have a lot to learn from other countries, but we have a lot of creativity in our own country that was lying fallow because we don't. So I would say that was probably, and also to encourage innovation and exploration and experimentation. We tend to be a little shy on encouraging people to do things differently or to think differently about it, or learning from other cultures and looking at history and not repeating it all the time.
As we look forward in the healthcare payment system in this country, there's now the movement to pay for quality and not quantity, but to really reward providers who are not just doing an A1C for diabetes, but helping people to get their A1Cs to goal. Do you have any thoughts on that for the NPs here?
Well, quality is very difficult to measure. And so what's quality in one year is not quality in another. If there were ways to measure it that were pretty solid, I would go for I'd go for production anyway. But you know. Medicine knows this very well. It doesn't follow it, but it knows it. I think it was the father of medicine who said, listen to the patient, and he will tell you his diagnosis. Listen to the patient. So just the basic listening skills. We were very dependent on technology and things like that. So there's a great deal of talk about that now.
But I think listening skills are what we can really bring to the table as nurse practitioners.
Yes. Because I think what we're doing is trying to change things one by one, and I think we need a much broader approach to health in communities. Because maybe that's my public health background, but there is some discussion that's useful. One is on population health. Another is a great deal more discussion on the social determinants of health and the orientation to health and wellness now. But until the big bucks get behind it, we're not going to get very far. But I think we should be part of making the healthcare system more humane rather than a great deal of dependence on so much technology. We're losing our clinical sharpness by depending on technology, I think.
I think medicine feels oftentimes the same way. When I've spoken with my physician colleagues who are in academia, they'll say, we spend so much of our time now teaching how to read an MRI and a CT, and what we've forgotten sometimes is that art of talking and assessing patients clinically. And
also, we don't use our personnel very efficiently. I was going to mention that Jeff Bauer, who's a health futurist and an economist, has written, this is the third edition of not what the doctor ordered. And Jeff talks about it as liberating the caregivers and empowering consumers for successful health reform. And so I think we've taken it upon ourselves to make all the decisions without asking the patient what he wants and what he's willing to give with it.
So we have about 2 or 3 minutes left. Is there anything I didn't get to that you'd like to leave to our NP colleagues or wrap up today?
Well, first of all, I think you need to look healthy yourself. Well, that would help. I think if you have a weight problem and you're trying to help people lose weight, they also lose confidence along with it.
So you want us as a profession to make sure that we're embracing that for which we are teaching.
Right.
Personally.
Yes. And your own stories can help patients sometimes decide on how they want to go about clearing up some of the things that they have control of. You know, when you think about it, what goes in and out of your mouth causes you more pain and pleasure than anything else. And so there are a lot of controls that we have in terms of our own health that a professional can't do for you. They can't go to exercise classes with you. They can't, be with you every meal you eat or how much you eat. So that the empowerment of the patient, of the person, I think we ought to start changing that patient to persons.
Great.
Rather than, because the patient has, terminology has a certain level of responsibility that isn't very clear.
I want to share with you a picture here. Do you remember this?
Oh, yes.
You had a great birthday, I think, didn't you?
That's a golf tournament.
In your behalf, I think, in December, right? 98th birthday. NPs flew in from all over the country to be at your birthday party.
I was overwhelmed by the greetings and cards and amazing.
And your colleagues sponsored a hole so that every hole you played, you got a chance to read a message from your NP colleagues, right?
Yes. The sponsorship was amazing.
To your foundation.
Yes.
Yes. So,
And the foundations were really at the universities to support nursing students and nursing faculty at Colorado and Rochester. So that both of those universities benefited from the...
And I think that's happening today, right? Because you were supposed to be retired.
Yeah.
Did you tell me last night you are the worst retiree ever? You flunked it, right?
Yes. Unsuccessful. Of course, I've been unsuccessful in several things in my life, but the recent one is this retirement. Friends like Wendy won't let you retire.
So, on behalf of myself and your 350 closest friends, thank you.
Well, I enjoyed being here. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Hope it was good for you. Right?
It was great for me. It was great. Thank you. It was an honor of a lifetime. I think a lot of these folks are going to follow you.
Okay.
I think they want some pictures.
No.